here, and thank you for having me. I was hoping that I could walk the stage here, but there's some roadblocks, so hopefully I won't trip. So today I'm going to shift the focus a little bit from the first two topics. Our company has recently underwent a pretty large, significant international expansion, and so I'm going to come first at this presentation with a focus on the global regulatory environment or framework. And it's really interesting from John's presentation. I think a lot of what we're seeing here, in the U.S. is this flood of illegal products because a lot of these companies are legally selling their products in other countries, going through their different countries' regulatory pathway. Unfortunately, they don't have the base standards, not all of them, don't have the base standards that would even know what is in these products, but furthermore, they certainly don't have and require the science and the research like we do here in the United States. First going to kind of cover briefly tobacco harm reduction being a global focus. Going to talk a lot about motivations of consumer behavior and some of these basic truths that should be considered when either in your product development phase and then innovation as we think of trying to develop products that consumers are going to want not just today, but 3 years and 5 years down the road, and particularly in order to get them, cigarette smokers, to switch off of their combustible cigarettes. I'm going to talk about integrating a cultural competency component into your organizations, and then specifically for Todd at FDA, I'm going to present a novel approach to how we are looking at data and the reliability of our data, the robustness of our data that our organization has been working on. So, briefly, just making a point here that we, right now we're in the United States. We might be in one of these little circles here, but it truly is a tobacco and nicotine industry is global in nature. And so while we may be developing a product specific for a consumer in the United States, we also should be considering how is that product going to translate to other countries should the opportunity arise, and certainly then vice versa. When we talk about the illegal illicit market here, yes, the products are considered illegal, but again, the point that we've been working on with companies worldwide is they are going through the legal pathway in the various countries, and then helping them to translate how that product will come to the market in the United States. So I'm just going to skip that. So first and foremost, when we think about this global framework, the first question we all should be asking at the beginning and end of the day is who our consumer is. So taking a world view, we've got roughly 1.3 billion tobacco users. We looked then at the U.S., and this might be outdated, it's a few years ago from the CDC, but we're looking at 28.3 million adults who currently smoke in the United States. I'm not going to certainly read this, but when you think about who your consumer is, long story short, there's going to be similarities across cultures, across countries, but there's also going to be differences. And those differences really should be accounted for, again, through the product development and innovation cycles, but as well in your going to market strategies. And so we'll get back to this when I cover some of these motivations for consumers' behavior, because those differences, yes, should absolutely be considered. There's actually the similarities among humans and their human behavior that I don't think are accounted for or discussed enough, even within applications to the FDA. So let's orient to what motivates a consumer to do what they do. And I get super excited about this. This is specifically what my PhD is in, and our other doctoral level scientists at ARAC. This is our focus. This is our bread and butter. So the ABCs of human behavior is affect, behavior, and cognition. So a lot of what the FDA asks for, specific to Module 6, focuses on behavior, right? They also want to know about youth behavior, and then obviously the behavior of a smoker switching to an alternative product. That's what we see. That's what can be easily measured. What is not, I don't think, talked about enough in our industry, specifically for PMTAs and MRTPAs, is what's not seen. And I know there's a section of perception and behavior, right? That perception piece gets lost, I think. And I know there's the TPPI studies that we conduct. But when we typically then go into the behavioral-based studies, that perception component typically gets dropped from the surveys and from focus. And so we really then can't connect the A and the C. So we're engaging in a behavior. We're only doing that because of the A and C. So affect is how we feel as a person. We have feelings about a stimulus, whether that's the labeling, the marketing, the instructions for use, a product. Then we also have beliefs that underlie that. And so it's a cyclical process. All day, every day, this is what we study. I see someone doing something. Our question is, why are they doing it? What's driving them to do that? And it is their affect, how they're feeling about it, and it's about their thoughts, their beliefs. A great example here is you have a stimulus presented to a participant, to a consumer, they're going to automatically develop an attitude towards that. It is automatic, and we have ways to assess that. That then is linked to affect, so it's a feeling, it's a response in you. You don't even really recognize it sometimes. Then it can be verbal. I feel sad. I feel frustrated. You see the behavior. Again, that's what our focus, right? Behavior. But what underlies that is really important. And then your cognition, which is going to be, again, those thoughts, those beliefs, your past experience, that leads you then to behave in a certain way. So really focus should be on changing your affect, changing smokers' beliefs and thoughts and feelings about smoking and about alternative products to then lead them to engage in switching behavior. So then turning to a few other kind of basic frameworks for human behavior are norms and the self. And so I'll start with norms. How we define that, we have social norms and we have personal norms. Social norms they're unwritten, not really written down anywhere, but they're rules in which we conduct ourselves and we behave in a culture and a society. It helps us make decisions on how we should behave in circumstances. So keep that in mind, because that's going to be really important when we get to the next slide, the next point. Personal norms are how I believe and feel I should act. It's what I consider as a person to be appropriate or right in certain contexts. It helps us decide how we're going to engage in a social situations. It has a very powerful influence on people's behaviors. What we have been seeing, we survey, we meet with, we study thousands of nicotine tobacco users on a yearly basis. And this is what we're seeing. You can see how my personal norm as a smoker is smoking is okay. I am a smoker, so it is okay. We have had significant changes in social norms within the United States specifically, which again, from a global perspective is important because internationally it's not there. It hasn't really been changed in some countries like it has in the United States. And a smoker's day-to-day life, they wake up, they know they're a smoker, but then they know their social norm, again, in the US is, oh no, like smoking is bad. It is bad, but then we think about a lot of our results, like a lot of our TBPI, a lot of our behavioral studies. The top reasons why someone will use an alternative product is because of the social norm aspect. Others around them, or it's not appropriate to do so anymore. So if you can imagine a smoker's life, I will say I probably cry every time I meet with, we have studies and we're meeting face to face and we're in groups and we hear their story. When you violate a norm, the social norm, it's a term, I guess norm violation is a technical term, but not too technical, and it's called deviance. So any behavior that is actually opposite of what the social norm is called a deviance. Typically then what comes from that are punishments. And so they're indirectly called sanctions. This can be in the form of gossip, being ostracized, being confronted by people. Again, smokers all the time are like, random people will stop me when I'm outside smoking over in a bush, and they're like, smoking's bad for you, I can't believe you still smoke, and they're ostracized, and they're criticized. And what has happened, and I don't know whether it was intentional or unintentional, I'm sure, I was at one time a social scientist in the government, so I'm sure this was planned out with other social scientists, but it's the whole no more smoking inside, let's go outside. That is all a process that led to the change in the social norm in the United States. It wasn't ever directly stated that that's why, I don't think. But what happens then is people are not exposed to a behavior because now it's been removed. So no smoking inside, meaning people aren't exposed to smoking as much. And then therefore, they believe that that's an inappropriate behavior because they're not exposed to it. And so what is transitioned is now in the United States, there is a negative and stigmatized perception around smoking combustible cigarettes. It's really important to take into consideration how that process happens, because at the end, I think one of the key takeaways is how can we change the social norm of transitioning smokers from cigarettes to alternative products here in the United States and worldwide. So then I want to cover this topic of the self. There are many terms and theories and frameworks underneath this self research and literature. The first that is really important to understanding motivations for consumers' behavior is self-affirmation. We tend to, as all humans, so this is a global focused presentation. While it may change across cultures a little bit, the tendency that of these techniques and theories really are a foundation across all humans. So the tendency for us to be exposed to things that will reinforce and affirm who I believe I am. So consumers have self-affirmation tactics. Typically, you find smokers around other smokers because that's a self-affirming behavior. Self-esteem and contingencies of self-worth. This has huge implications for our industry and trying to transition smokers off of cigarettes. So self-esteem is what we call a stable trait. So your self-esteem does not change throughout the day. You have a relatively base self-esteem. What does impact, or what does change, are what's called contingencies of your self-worth. So your self-worth is something that it fluctuates. And what we see here is, again, across all human behavior, it's a beautiful thing. I will do things that I know I'm good at, I know I'll be successful at, and that I view as positive. That's what I will pursue as a person. I am not going to pursue things that I know I'm bad at or I'm going to fail at. So me, cooking, I can't cook. Do I care that I can't cook? No. It's very low in my contingency of self-worth. It has nothing to do with my self-esteem and how I feel about myself. But now let's take that context and apply it to smokers. Majority of smokers fail or fail at quitting, and then they come back, right? They do many failed quit attempts. Can you imagine doing it one more time when I've already failed 5 times? That is I have low self-worth there. I don't think I can do it. I know I can't do it because I haven't done it in the past. Or when we see studies that we do, and we're like, here's a new, whatever, pouch product. And they're like, not gonna work. Like, already tried. They failed at using a pouch product to transition them off smoking. They know that they think they're gonna fail at it again. So what we really try to focus on is closing that gap or considering these components when we're trying to switch a smoker or work with companies to develop a product that will switch a smoker. So self-discrepancy, this is one of my favorite topics. We all, including all consumers, we have a belief that there's an ideal self. There is someone I want to be, who I think I should be, but then there's me and who I am. And so we hear a lot from smokers that I want to quit. I really want to quit, but me, actual me, doesn't quit. Like, I can't. And so there's that discrepancy. That leads to very negative emotions and feelings, and that affects before. That then prevents them from trying a new product, continuing, other alternative products or poly tobacco products to get them to switch. So there's that self-discrepancy between who I want to be and where I am. And honestly, I don't even want to think about it because that arises such negative affect. Self-perception, also a huge concept here with the self. It is the tendency basically to perceive myself to be what I do. So my behavior defines who I am as a person. And this has implications, again, in our industry. I hear it all the time. Once a smoker, always a smoker. I'm always going to be a smoker. It is in their identity, it's attached to their self-esteem, and it is their perception of their self. So if we really want to develop products and get products authorized that are going to not just switch a smoker for 6 weeks, not for 3 months, but I'm talking 6 months, 2 years, and 6 years, which is our goal, and to develop products that will get them there, it's not just about the product. It's about understanding who they are as a person and an individual and bridging that gap from what is going to allow them to get over all of these basic feelings of oneself. So it's just thinking about novel approaches, right? So when we think about what motivates a consumer to use a product, sure, there's the economic price point. We hear that all the time. The satisfaction of the product. Am I getting enough nicotine? Is it hitting me right? Does the form match my lifestyle? Is it easy to use? How's the performance and the sensation of the flavors? All these things, I've been in the industry 10 years, all these things matter. They will never not matter. But what we should also be asking is, who does my consumer think they are? Do we ever do that when we're developing our studies? What does my consumer believe they are good at and what they'll be successful at? And what do they believe they're going to fail at? How does the thought of stopping smoking make them feel? How does the thought of switching to another product make them feel? Have they had failures in the past that impacts that feeling? And then how can we influence social norms to make it, and I hear you, Ty, for sure about this tobacco cessation, and it should be about not just transitioning smokers away from cigarettes, but also complete elimination of it should be your end goal. And I heard that loud and clear today. But how can we influence social norms? The first step is going to be social norms that it's appropriate to use alternative products versus cigarettes. If we go all the way to the extreme of no nicotine in tobacco products, my concern is that middle stage of, we gotta do it stepwise. We have to change first the social norm of, e-vapor, e-cigarette products, pouch products that have been going through the regulatory pathway and shown to be reduced risk, safer, that's okay, right? Because all they're hearing right now is that nothing is okay. Okay, then another point here, kind of staying on this global network and regulatory framework. What I'm also not seeing worldwide is cultural competency being integrated into the product development innovation framework. I see a lot of companies sometimes scrambling. They've developed a product in Indonesia, they developed it in Spain, and they're like, oh, and I want to launch it in the US. Well, if you've developed your product in a specific country, and you have not considered the other variables that are contributing to success and what your consumer wants in another country, I'm not sure how relevant or how well that's going to work out in translating it, say, from Spain to the US. So when we think about cultural competency, it's related to the point I made earlier about the norm violations. So any behavior that infringes on a norm, and it's going to vary across societies and countries. So think about that. I'm in Spain, and a social norm is A, B, and C. And when I violate that, there's punishment, there's being criticized. You've developed a product in that context. Now you want to bring it to the market in the US. The social norms aren't the same, right? And so being able to translate that with a lot of success, I would be hesitant on that. So cultural competence is this belief in this framework that it's the ability of an individual, of us, to be able to understand and respect values, attitudes, beliefs, feelings across different cultures, and the ability to apply that to plan your research, to plan your products, implement market launch, evaluate your research in that context. So learning the new patterns of behavior. And this has evolved since this concept was applied. When I was at NIH and then doing a lot of federal government work, they were amazing at applying cultural competency to their programs and their research. And I haven't necessarily seen that translate into other industries, so that's why I wanted to bring this up. What does it look like? The best thing you can do, and what our team does, is you get off your Zoom, you get off your remote, and you travel to the country. You travel to the consumer. So you engage in what's called experiential learning. You're actually with them in person, learning their culture, learning their norms, learning their view of the self in that context. You're removing your biases, you're removing your insensitivities, and you're actually learning. So how we apply this is we are conducting in-person research in various countries to be able to make sure we are implementing the cultural competency component within the product development process, and then in getting products then translated to the U.S. market. Okay, So now this is, I was supposed to have our statistician come and present this part, so please bear with me. I have pretty big statistics background, but he has much bigger. So we're gonna get into a little bit of statistical talk here. And I'm super excited about this. The FDA, and that's across the board for medical devices, across the board in their centers. This is their approach to assessing or analyzing your data and then determining whether or not you can generalize your results to the greater population. So it's called NHST, Null Hypothesis Significance Testing. And we've heard over and over again, rightfully so. So glad it finally came out. Studies should have hypotheses, and your hypotheses should drive your study, your research question, your design, your survey items, and your analysis. So what this does is we hear a lot, we have our applications. They're about averages, right? So we randomly assign people to two groups, or we collect data on two different types of consumers, not even randomly assign them. I'm gonna get an average of this group and an average of that group. And I'm gonna say to the FDA, look, we have statistical significant differences between the group exposed to flavored products versus the group exposed to tobacco products. That is then, you're able to say, I have a population, I've sampled from my population, I've provided hypotheses to set up my design and my research, I've eliminated biases, I'm gonna conduct inferential statistics to then generalize your results to your population. Exactly what has been asked. So your null hypothesis, as it has been done for many, many, many years, the research we do follows this because it is what the expectation of the FDA is. We will always probably have NHST testing. It says my null hypothesis is my two groups are the same. So I'm going to have a reduction in cigarettes per day, the same in my tobacco tasting group versus my flavor group. The alternative hypothesis is what you're actually assessing and analyzing against, which actually says, no, my averages and my reduction in cigarettes per day are different between the two groups. You get your average, you compare them, you get your result. And I would say, to date, that's not what the FDA, that's not what the CCB has seen. And I don't think too much in some of the applications that they've been asking for, but that's been a fun ride. An alternative approach here is going to be observation-oriented modeling. This takes the approach of we collect data for the agency, and we are now going to focus on the individual. We're going to focus on the patterns of each individual's behavior over time. So it removes the average. It removes the aggregate. What this then does, it seeks to say, I have an effect or not. I'm going to infer a cause for that effect based on the individuals within my study. So we know APPH, public health, right? So we have to generalize at a population-based level what's going to happen when our product goes to market. But the population is made up of individuals. And so we can look at the average of our group, and then we infer to the population. Or we can say, I'm going to take it down to the level of each individual in my study. And then I'm going to tell the FDA what my individuals did based on what I thought they were going to do. And the other bullet points here, I'll save that for when Ian can attend, because that gets into the technical aspects of the modeling. Okay, so when we look at then our hypotheses, again, in the traditional, this is what's done in academia. It's done in all research pretty much across the world. Publications, so when we publish, this is what we do. When we send stuff to the FDA, it's what we do. The aggregate analysis, and it's the mean difference, right? So did my cigarette sticks per day, how much did it go down in my flavor versus tobacco? What the OOM does is it says, I hypothesize that at baseline, my participants' cigarettes per day is going to be highest. Because there's been no intervention, right? There's been no product exposure. At month 1, I'm going to have a reduction in cigarettes per day. But that's gonna probably get larger over time. So maybe at month 1, month 2, month 3, month 6. So the hypothesis basically is the cigarettes per day is gonna go down over time. The causal mechanism here, in NHST world, it's called your manipulated variable. It's the variable you're manipulating. So in one example, which I'll get ready to show to you without disclosing confidential client information, the variable is flavor or tobacco tasting, right? And so we're basically saying the causal mechanism to the behavior change of an individual is going to be based on the product exposure, flavor versus tobacco tasting. Furthermore, it's going to be larger for those that are in the, say, full portfolio of flavor group. So let me show you an example. Hold on. I don't even know where I'm. There we go. All right, on the left-hand side, this is our traditional aggregate model, null hypothesis significance testing. We've all, if you've submitted an application to the FDA, you've seen it, you've done it. So what our study showed, using the standard approach, we've got, in pink, Willie, we've got our portfolio of flavor products. In gray, we've got our tobacco tasting. This is actual data. Cigarettes per day at baseline of the two groups. We're gonna stop here at this month 1. Anybody, what happened at month 1 for both groups? Wake up. What did you say, John? It went up. Everybody seeing that? I don't know if I have a pointer here. I'm sure I'll have something that's not right. But it went up. So from baseline, both groups, cigarettes per day went up at month 1. Everybody like to see that story? That's what we're seeing, right? Okay. And then the story ends, right? We go on to show, significant decrease in both groups, but more so for the flavor. But OOM is totally different. It says, okay, baseline to month 1, actually 51% of the people in the tobacco group, their cigarettes per day went down. In the flavor tasting group, 59% of my participants, CPD, went down. Wait, the story was that their cigarettes per day increased. No, you actually had 51% of them in one group decrease and 59% in the other group decrease. Totally different story. Then if you want to pick it apart even more, we look at, okay, talking about, to Todd's point earlier of, your people that dropped out, including all of those folks. When we look at that, of course here we're presenting the total sample, even of those that did not continue on, as the most conservative approach. But let's say we remove those, okay? Now, let's say we look at our data by individual, by person. Actually, what happened in this data is that increase at month 1 was driven by like 5 people who increased their cigarettes per day pretty significantly, okay? But wait a minute, your story, so your story is everyone in my study at an aggregate level, we had an increase in CPD at month 1. That is not what happened. For one, it was driven by 5 people who went up from maybe 10 cigarettes to 20 cigarettes a day. And that drove that mean up. So now the story is it went up. No, it didn't. 5 people did. And in fact, when we go back to those 5 people, it's funny because typically what we see is I lost my job. We went through a divorce. Like something fundamental that has changed their way of life has occurred, and it's an outside variable that's coming into the study. But the majority of the other people, when we remove, this is in consideration again of the full sample, those that weren't still participating, but when we remove them, it's like every cigarettes per day went down. But that's not the story again. At the typical method of conducting our analyses, that's not the story that's told in our application narrative. So we're really pushing for this. We're actually going to be having an online workshop to present the OOM in more technical detail. So be on the lookout or reach out to, we've got 5 people here on our team. So come find us and reach out if you're interested in joining that session. We're also, Todd, we got something coming to you soon because we really need to get the feedback from the regulator. and to the extent to which this would be considered as an acceptable alternative or in addition to understanding, what is standard right now, but as an alternative approach. So in summary, what our day-to-day lives are, we're an iceberg. Each of us is an individual, we're icebergs. You see behaviors, I see behaviors, we all do. But what you see is not what you get, right? So underlying the behaviors are our perceptions, our attitudes, our feelings, our beliefs, our values, our norms, our social norms. That is what drives behavior. And so if those variables aren't being considered in the product development process, in innovation, in the various ways of going to market and providing evidence to you all for is this APPH or not, I don't know if the full story is being covered. So behavior, much more complex than what you see. Each consumer is motivated by different factors. So it's crazy because we think one product's going to do it to switch a smoker. We're all different. Yeah, we can segment out and say here are the key traits for why someone would prefer a pouch over an e-vapor product, or an e-vapor product that's open system versus closed system. We can do that all day, but at the end of the day, when you talk to people, they each have their own individual motivating factors for why they do what they do, or why they select a product versus not another product. And then finally, one size does not fit all. And so kind of expanding upon that point, I think it's really hard that, we are in the regulatory environment here in the US. Applications take significant resources, time, energy, focus. It's a period of time before they can even be legally authorized on the market. When we don't typically see one product switching smokers. We see, 2 or 3 products, and it's not at the same time, but it's different times of day. And so, is there an approach for some type of regulatory pathway to market that says, hey, this portfolio of products is actually most APPH, because that's where I'm getting the bigger bang for my buck. It's not just the one single product. And then when we think about the youth, youth switching risk versus benefit, it's difficult because if there is a youth issue, that just increases the amount that you got to show the benefit, right? And that comes in the forms of your study designs to make sure it's a rigorous, most rigorous design, which is the RCT. So now you've got a high percentage here, but what likelihood really can one product reach that likelihood, right, of sustaining switching for long periods of time, when what we typically see is there's going to be some patches in there, there's going to be maybe a heat not burn in e-cigarette, and so if we really want to capture APPH, it's really understanding that one size, one product really doesn't fit all, and so how are we going to accommodate that? Oh, now it's done. And then finally, psychological approaches, basic understanding of all human behavior could benefit innovation, product development, and then also the data that we're providing to the FDA to get a more wholesome picture of what our science looks like and how we're switching smokers successfully. We got some references, of course, and thank you so much for your attention. We do have a table out there, and I have 4 of the team members here, so please look for us and look forward to chatting.
Thank you very much. Yes. Do we have one question for Jessica? Where is she?
I'm back here.
Thank you very much. That was very